are back and ready to go for another episode of the Shutdown Inning podcast. Steven Rissotto here with Tylor Hall. Tylor, what's going on? I know we took a week off, but it's good to be back.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, good to be back, man. It's nice to take a week off while it's a little slow because pretty soon we're not going to have any off weeks because we're going to have real baseball in front of us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it gave my vocal cords. I had a bit of a voice thing that happened this week, and I am finally feeling great. So we're back and spring training.
You sound great, Steven. You sound great.
And as do you. And we should mention to the listeners, since we've talked, because our last episode was the Lotus one, we saw each other. So like Tylor and I are like
Yeah.
Tyler's in kind of the northern, California area up near Sacramento. I'm in the Bay Area, and we saw each other at the Giants Fan Fest. So it was a pretty good time. We had a great time there.
Yeah, we've met a few times before, but it's not a super regular occurrence. So always good to be able to see you, my friend, and got to bump into a lot of other folks from Twitter, which was awesome, and just to be at the yard and be there with some friends, it was great.
And it started raining kind of like during and then after we kind of left a little bit. So it was a good day. That's probably what led to me losing my voice, but no, it was cool to see everybody for sure. And I guess the big thing that everybody's looking forward to, we know about spring training happening and coming up very soon, but the WBC, Tylor, the WBC is back. It was supposed to be back, I think, a few years ago, and then the pandemic kind of halted things. But the rosters were just announced. I mean, I am very excited for this tournament. What about you?
Yeah, I feel like I'm more excited for it this year than in previous years, just for me personally. I think I'll have more time to kind of enjoy it this year. And some of these rosters are stacked, which also adds to some excitement. I think if you look at Team USA's lineup, it's fun to see a lot of these guys, saying like, okay, I'll play, and so I'm really looking forward to it as well. I know you've followed it pretty close every year. So how do you think the rosters in general stack up to previous years, not just for USA, but across the tournament?
Yeah, no, we were talking about it and, a little bit before we started recording and, you know, USA is they're going to be a juggernaut and as will Team Dominican and, the United States had a lot of guys, kind of commit to this thing pretty early with, your Arenados and Trout. A lot of them did it because Trout, with a guy like Mike Trout spearheading the recruiting process, I think you're going to have a good turnout. Trey Turner is going to play. Goldschmidt was the MVP last year. I mentioned Arenado. Then you got Mookie Betts in the outfield. I mean, Harper was going to play at some point before he had the surgery. I mean, this is no slouch of a team for sure, and they're the regaining champs. They're the team that these other countries have to beat. And on the pitching side of things, they have some arms there that we recognize. We know Adam Wainwright, Miles Michaelis, Clayton Kershaw. It's going to be cool, kind of a flashback seeing Kershaw and Wainwright there in the same kind of
Yeah.
rotation if they start like two consecutive games or something. But I think it's cool because it's something like a lot of these guys want to do. And like, I'm sorry, but Team Dominican, as much as, we're all rooting for the US here in the States, Team Dominican has just a juggernaut of a team. I mean, they are so stacked up and down their lineup. We were talking about it.
Yeah.
I don't even think their pitching matters. I kind of crapped on the pitching a little bit of all these teams in that they didn't have enough depth, committed. But like, I mean, you look at Rafael Devers and Wander Franco, Guerrero, Machado. I mean, they got all the stars playing for them. I mean, it's pretty absurd. Julio Rodriguez,
Yeah.
Juan Soto. I mean, it's pretty absurd stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like so many young players that, MLB should be promoting are in this thing, and a lot of them are on the Dominican Republic team. And so, you know, you just reeled off a bunch of names. Even if you looked at, like you said, we had talked about the pitching and it was a little, but, they have, Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins. They've got, Cristian Javier, who we'll talk about in a little bit as well from the Astros. They got Johnny Cueto,
Yeah.
I think that it'll be fun to watch him pitch as well. So, It's just, some of these, it doesn't matter who's pitching if you're pitching against literal all-star teams. And I think, between the USA and the Dominican, they're basically going to be throwing out all-star offensive lineups, which will be really fun to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's kind of a few other teams that I have my eye on a little bit. Obviously, Japan is always good. They always show up for this kind of thing. But there's a part of me that likes Team Italy too. Because Risotto,
Of course
obviously.
you do.
Yes, Italian. And I'm looking at their roster like Matt Harvey. I didn't know he was Italian. And then they have a few other guys in there too. Miles Mastroboni from the Cubs is one of their infielders. He came up with the Rays last year. I actually interviewed him for a story in junior college, so it's going to be cool to see him.
And they have
Um,
4 catchers. You can never have too many catchers on Team Italy, I guess.
Four catchers, and I don't know one of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Mike
Well,
Piazza is the manager, by the way. So
yeah. One thing I've noticed is there's a few teams that are carrying just 3 outfielders. So it's interesting. I guess they'll be playing all the time and hoping no one gets hurt. And I'm sure there's some guys that are used to, at least shagging some outfields. Maybe you throw a guy out there if you need to, but a lot of it's just, when you're breaking it down by country, you got to kind of get who you can to fit in on some of these rosters. But yeah, it's just fun because a lot of these guys have been looking forward to representing their country for a while now. And yeah, I'm looking forward to, like I said, just kind of being able to spend some more time paying attention to it this year for sure.
yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, Israel, I'm looking at their team. Danny Valencia, who's retired. I mean, he's going to get in there, and Alex Dickerson, a former Giant, Jock Peterson, a current Giant. I mean, it's fun looking at some of the names on this team because on these teams because remember Eric Gagne pitched in the last WBC for Team Canada, and he was
Yeah.
retired. So I think it's cool. And Andres Torres was supposed to play for Puerto Rico. He was trying to get on that team, but I guess it never happened. So,
Uh,
um,
yeah, Canada's a kind of an interesting team as well. They've got some good young bats out there and some established guys. They got, Freddie Freeman, Tyler O'Neill. So they'll be fun to watch as well. And so, how often do they play in pool play? Like I said, I know you're really into
so
it. So it's
I
every
have no,
every few days, I guess, probably.
yeah, I think the whole thing is like 15 days, if I'm not mistaken, or I don't know how long, but um, I have no idea how the tournament works. I don't know how many like losses you're allowed to have. I think is every win a must. I'd have to do more research into it because I can't
Well, I
remember
mean,
from the
there's
last
pool
time.
play. There's pool play at the beginning. I assume it's like the World Cup where, you have a pool and the top probably two, each team, you play every team in your pool and like the 2 best records come out of each pool.
Yeah.
And then you have, a final 8 and you probably play, single elimination from there, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'll have to do more research onto it and check it out. But I can't wait to see some of these matchups.
Uh,
And Mark DeRosa's managing. I'm a big DeRosa fan.
yeah.
So it's gonna be
Yeah.
it's gonna be a good tournament though. I'm
I,
excited.
I, I think it'll be fun too to like have some real competitive baseball to help kind of make spring training feel like it's going by a little quicker because there's always kind of that weird lull in the middle of spring training, like everyone reports and everyone's kind of jacked up, like all right, baseball's here, and then the first couple games everyone's into it, and then it's like okay, let's get through these games. All the regulars are playing 2 innings a game and sitting, so it kind of there's a lot of downtime in spring training, especially for fans. The players are working the whole time, but for as far as fans and things to watch, it can get a little stagnant. And so I think having the WBC will definitely add some excitement to the month and a half leading up to opening day.
No doubt about it. And for the Giants fans out there, there will be a point where Team USA does like a scrimmage against the Giants, and it will be televised by the Giants TV network, I believe. So be on the lookout for that. I don't have the exact date, but I know that there's a lot of Giants fans listening. But yeah, WBC is going to be great. And I was looking at the rules, and here's one thing that I found interesting. They will not adapt the rules for this tournament. Um, they will not adapt the new rules that are coming to MLB. They will not adapt that for this tournament. So no, like you could shift
So
still.
shifts are in,
Yep. No pitch
regular
clock,
size bases.
regular size bases, and that's the perfect segue, Tyler, to this next thing. Because we've talked a lot about the shifts. If you want to go back and listen to Ron Wotus, he was, he knows more about that stuff than anybody. But we have not gotten into some of the other stuff, the bigger bases, the pitch clock. So let's start with the pitch clock. This is something that's been in the minor leagues for maybe a few years now, and it's coming to baseball. Any first thoughts?
My initial reaction, it's something I'll probably get used to, but I've never, especially being at a game, I've never been like, oh, I wish this game would be over sooner. I go there to, relax and watch a game and not feel like it's so rushed. And I think one of the beautiful things about baseball has always been there's no clocks. It's its own pace. And I think that changes that a little bit. I get where they're coming from. I think it'll be interesting to see how some players adapt, because it is going to be on, everyone, when they hear pitch clock, they think it's all on the pitcher, but the players have, some skin in the game as well, because I think they're only allowed to step out once and at bat now. And, so many players are used to stepping out after every pitch. I think it'll be interesting about, I think it's if it expires because of the pitcher, it's a ball. If it expires because of the hitter, it's an automatic strike. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and kind of how, imagine a big spot and the guy is a half second late delivering a pitch, and you got Angel Hernandez waving his arms to, make a call.
And figure out which guy to blame.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I guess as long as the hitter doesn't step out, it's on the pitcher. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the hitter has to be it. I was listening to Austin Slater talk about this. I went back and listened to all the Fan Fest stuff, but he was on the rules committee that like voted against all this. But he's I think he said that the batter has to be in the box by 8 seconds left. So, um, I guess if they're not, I don't know if the pitch clock expires early.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, 8 seconds left. Like pitchers are going to take advantage of that. They're going to do something, and yeah, pitchers are going to do something anyways. They're going to find ways to tie their shoe. They're going to do all this stuff
Yeah.
that's gonna make it easier on
There'll
that.
be some gamesmanship, as there
Yeah.
always has been in baseball. And another thing I think that's tied into the pitch clock is that they're limiting how many times a guy can throw over to
Yep.
first. And the one thing, and I need to read up a little bit more on. I need to renew my athletic subscription. But was it they can is the limit per at bat, or is it per pitcher with per runner on base? Because I read that I think they can throw over twice, and if they throw over a third time, they have to get the guy out, or the guy gets second base.
Mhm.
Is that
I thought it was per at bat, but now I have to check because if it were per at bat, then you're looking at a guy throwing. Wow, that's a huge water gallon, Tyler. That thing's massive. Um,
I'm down to a bottle of water a day.
yeah. But I do think that and the
for
pitch
for
clock,
for those that are only
yeah,
listening, I drink a gallon jug of water every day, and sometimes I just have the gallon. I don't have another bottle to pour it in, so sometimes I just drink right out of the gallon. So that's why I
it
see
just came out
things.
of nowhere. Kind of scared me for a second. I just see this big gallon. Um, but back to the pitch clock. One thing that is interesting that I think will happen in regards to like stealing bases, and we'll get to the bigger bases in a second, but like by the time the pitch clock is like three, or like it's counting down, and the guy at first base, like, I mean, you got to jump, because that guy's not going to throw over, right? With 3 seconds left, or maybe pitchers will with 3 seconds left.
Well, that's well, yeah, because my when I first heard of the limit on throwovers, I was like, well, guy throws over twice, third time, the guy can just get a massive lead and just walk to second base.
Yep.
But that's where, they can attempt the third time, but you have to get the guy out. And so, but you can definitely get a little bit more aggressive, especially if you can coax a guy to throw over, because they're going to have to be damn sure they can pick you off the third time if they're going to throw over. Um, so, you know, I think one thing, and it's similar to kind of like the three batter minimum that I didn't like, is I feel like a lot of these restrictions are coming at the pitching and at the defense's expense.
Always.
Uh, And so I think that's one thing. Maybe it's because when I played, I was a much better defender than a hitter, and I've always kind of loved that side of the game. But I get that they want more offense, but it just sucks that they have to do it by penalizing the pitching and the defense.
Well, if you think about it, every rule change or most rule changes that have ever been implemented in the history of baseball has gone against pitching. Pitching was so good
Yeah.
in the late 60s, they lowered the mound. Or they
Yep.
lowered the mound. They implemented the DH, so a pitcher has to face an extra hitter. Um they this right here, the pitch clock, like basically saying that, you guys have to hurry up a little bit. The sticky stuff, right? Cracking down on that. So like everything
Yeah.
these rules committees do is to go against the pitcher because pitching is just so good.
Yeah.
And
I think one thing though, the pitch clock, like I said, there is some skin in the game for the hitters too, and they're going to have to kind of go in with a game plan.
yeah.
Sometimes I think guys step out that, okay, they just threw an 0-2 breaking ball, a little bit outside. What should I expect next? And they could kind of step out and kind of think that through. Now they're gonna have to know their stuff and have their scouting report in their mind on how this guy might attack him, because he's not going to have that time to step out and adjust his batting gloves and think about what might be coming next. But it is mostly, at the pitcher's expense, but it does impact the
Mhm.
hitter a little bit too, than more than I think some people realize.
Yeah, that's true. And I think pitch com's going to be a good thing for the pitchers too. Once that's kind of, more developed and less problems with it, then I think it's going to
You
really
don't have
help.
to have the catcher being an IT guy trying to figure out why his stuff's not working like mid
Yeah.
inning.
You have to
I feel like every
Mhm.
other game, Joey Bart was trying to fix his stuff so he could get it to work.
Yeah, I mean, you got to straighten that stuff out because now you're going to need it. Like, you can't have a pitcher looking in for signs anymore because it just takes up too much
Yeah.
time. And like, what is the pitch clock now? Like 20 seconds or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was runner on is runner on is 25.
Maybe
Bases
25.
empty was 20.
Yeah, because I mean, the fastest pitchers in baseball, they work 15 seconds. Like Sam
Yeah.
Long, Sam Long, I worked a Sam Long start last year, and that was what I remember from the notes. Like the top pitchers, he was among one of the fastest working pitchers. Him and Alex Wood were on
Mhm.
that list, and it was like 15 seconds and 16 seconds. So,
Yeah.
some guys are gonna have a really hard time with this. Like Kenley Jansen comes to mind.
Yeah.
The relievers, they all work
Yeah, I
really
feel like a
slow.
lot of relievers. I feel like starters, they like to, for the most part, like to
Mhm.
work quick and keep it going and, just keep that momentum for their team. The relievers, they like to come in and they like to slow it down. And so I think
Mhm.
that later in the games, we'll see really some guys that have to adjust what they're doing, and we'll see how it goes. It'll speed up the games for sure, but you're going to have some guys throwing some pitches they're not sure of, and some of those are going to be fastballs in where they might not be fully committed on, and we might see some guys getting hit. Not I'm not saying it would be intentionally, but
Yeah.
you're going to have some guys. Okay, fine, you're calling a fastball in. I got to get this pitch off because we have 2 seconds left, so I'll go for it. And
Yeah. And a few more
it'll be
things
interesting.
a few more things on the pitch clock. Like there is like the theory that maybe it would, more injuries would come out of it because guys don't maybe have the time to recover in between pitches. But I do think I remember reading that the injury rate in the minor leagues, while experimenting with this went down. So, maybe it's more, I don't know. I don't know about that. But you brought up a good point about how like you never really, like baseball associated with clocks, right? And I feel the same way to an extent, but also
Mhm.
I am curious about this one because I've heard a lot of old school people in favor of this because if you think about it, this is the baseball they grew up watching in the 70s and the 80s where everything was quick, quick, quick. And I mean, this style of baseball with the pitch clock has been played before. So in a way, it's like not really new, but it's new to
Yeah.
this generation of players.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I mean, games were a lot faster back in the day, and part of that was not every game was on TV. So I feel like a lot of the game is slowed down because of television, and obviously baseball is not going to get rid of that because that's how they make their money. Guys definitely do work a little slower, I feel like, in general. So I'm not saying it's all TV and ad revenue related, but
mhm.
Yeah, guys used to, there were games that used to be over in like an hour and 40 minutes. And you'd be like, oh, was it like rain shortened? If you look at some old box scores and it's like,
Yeah.
no, they got all 9 in and it was just an hour and like 45 hour and 50 minutes. And now that's really hard to come by. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we could go to bigger bases now. We haven't touched on that. Baseball is going to have bigger bases. I believe it's by a few inches bigger. And the common term that was thrown around at FanFest was pizza boxes. And that's kind of what like players are saying they resemble. So they're not only going to be bigger, they're also going to be like it won't have the height that the other bases had. It's going to be a little bit like shorter. So like if a guy maybe might miss a base while running, that's how like they're so used to hitting a certain height on the base that things are going to be different. But yeah, more stolen bases. I think the guys that steal bases already are going to have more. It's going to be easier to avoid a tag at second or third base. The first baseman won't get stepped on as much. I mean,
yeah, I
it,
mean, I think it'll be more, it might lead to more, base stealing more off of the more surface area to slide to avoid a tag
yeah.
than the shorter distance. They're going from 15 inches square to 18 inches square. And when you do the math, that makes it literally 4.5 inches shorter from like first to second or from second to third. And so, there's not many guys where you're like, 90 feet was too far. 89 feet and 12 inches though, or 89 feet and 8 inches. I feel safe stealing at that distance. So I think it's going to be more, these, I love that, with part of what I love about replay is, it used to be if the ball beats you there, you're out, and you make an attempt to
Mhm.
tag the guy, the umpire's gonna call you out. Some of these swim moves that guys do to slide, I love being able to see the improvisation of these base runners. And so, I think having that extra surface area to slide to will be where it makes the most impact on at least the base stealing aspects.
Yeah, and that's what Tyro Strada said that the Giants second baseman Tyro Strada, he said at FanFest that there was a lot of times where he was called out by, inches, centimeters by replay
Yeah.
because, the catcher threw him out and he, was barely out or something like that. But I
Mm-hmm.
guess my co-argument to that is there's plenty of times when guys try and steal bases and they're out by a mile, probably more so than the barely safe guys. But
Yeah.
it will change things. One other thing that will change because of this is like Brandon Crawford's been in the league for over 10 years, and he's known a certain kind of footwork at second base, and that's going to change a little bit because it's going to be a bigger base that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be interesting too, is to see how some of these middle infielders that have been doing it for a while respond to playing with a bigger base. But I guess that's just another thing to look for in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really going to be a similar for everybody because I mean, bases are basically the same size all the way from like high school through big league. So all these guys are going to, their footwork, especially up the middle, is going to be the same. They've all been playing it the same way for their whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. One thing I'm interested to see, and I mentioned it really briefly before we started recording, was I'm hoping that these new bags are also maybe it's harder to come off the bag accidentally because I hate the one thing I really hate about replay is that a guy slides in, he beats the tag, and then just because these bags have no give, their foot pops off the bag for like a split second, and if they keep the tag on, they call you out. I don't feel like that's the spirit of why replay was brought in. So I'm hoping these new bags have kind of addressed that as well, so we can get back to why replay was actually brought in.
Yeah, it's such a cheap shot when guys get called out for that. Coming off the bag barely. Like I remember like Andrelton Simmons used to hold the tag. And holding the tag is different for when a guy's like, it's so much it's got a different meaning for everything, but if a guy barely gets off, like you said, and you could barely see it and you have to actually visibly zoom in on replay, then don't call him
Yeah.
out. I think that's lame. I mean, if a guy overslides by two
Yeah, if
feet, then
they
yeah, he's gone.
yeah, if you overslide the bag or you slide and you actually pop up off the bag, like you're standing and you come off, like cool. But like when you're sliding, what's your other option? To jam your ankle into the bag so you don't come off and then you're injured for a couple weeks? Like, what are we doing here?
Exactly. And I hope these new bases have some sort of you know, traction, I guess is the right word,
Mm-hmm.
to where if it's raining outside, we don't have to have another, Bryce Harper incident. Do you remember that when Bryce Harper like flipped running to first base? It
Mm-hmm.
was against the Giants. It was when he was still in Washington, and there was a play at first base and Jeff Samardzija was covering the bag and Bryce Harper slipped on a wet bag and it looked like he just blew his knee out, but I think it was just a hyperextension. But keeping guys safe, I think, at first base and preventing collisions and tripping, I think that's definitely a positive. So,
Yeah, I've slipped on a wet home plate before, and that
oh,
wasn't fun.
yeah.
So,
I saw something where it's like, should home plate be bigger?
oh gosh.
Start having all these pitches be called strikes.
Yeah, I mean, probably the only reason they wouldn't make it bigger is because of, it impacts the strike zone. We don't really need a bigger strike zone.
Not at all. If anything, we might need a smaller one.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, yeah, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's going to be new for a lot of people. It has some of these changes have floated around the minors for a couple of years, like you said, but watching it every night for most people, unless you go to, a bunch of minor league games, which a lot of people don't, a lot of this is going to be new. And so it'll be interesting. One thing that is kind of interesting with it being in the minors, some of these guys have come up, where this is going to be their first year in the bigs. Like it might work to their advantage because they've
mhm.
played with a few of these rules before. So maybe a slight advantage to some of these prospects that are going to be coming up.
Yeah, and those guys have more wisdom on this stuff than some of the veteran players in the big leagues. So, like, I
Yeah, where
mean,
usually, they might be picking the veterans' brain. It might be turned for maybe the first time ever, where veterans are going to be approaching the rookies and saying, like, "How did you? What were your thoughts on this?"
exactly. That's 100% going to be happening, especially in terms of the shift in the pitch clock for sure. I mean, because these guys like pitch clocks are definitely a thing where you need to have a strategy on how to deal with it, and the pitchers and the hitters, I mean, they have more experience than the guys that have been in the big leagues. And I think that's going to be
Yeah.
something that we look for in spring training. But new rules, I mean, I mean, I don't know how many times we could say that we're interested to see. It's kind of a cliche at this point, but it's true. We are
But we
interested
are.
to see, yes, interested to see how this all works. But yeah, and by the way, there's a few signings that happened like that we could briefly breeze over just a bit. And you stop me if there's anything that we should mention here, but about the players. But Andrew Chafin, the left-handed reliever, is returning to the Arizona Diamondbacks on a 1-year, $5.5 million deal with an option. 7.5 million is that option for 2024. And this is a guy who's one of the best relievers in baseball on the market. Didn't get a multi-year deal. He's going to be 33. So he's going to Arizona. Any thoughts there? I mean, middle
You
reliever.
know, yeah, middle reliever. Some of these guys are, that are signing this week, and
Mhm.
it happens most, off seasons. There's always some guys that you're like, wow, I'm surprised they haven't signed yet, and then we get within, striking distance of spring training, and so these guys are going to start finding homes. It didn't really jump out. Oh, Chafin, wow, but
Yeah. No, you bring up a good point
um,
because,
but
and this is a horrible example that I'm going to bring up, but in 2010, the Giants signed Aubrey Huff right before spring training. Sorry to use that example. I don't want to, but and it's kind of like, a guy like that was a, good value pick for them that year who hit home runs. And but
yeah,
this is where you could get discount guys who could actually produce for you, and Chafin is one of them that definitely stands out. And Alex Reyes going to the Dodgers also. He's going to the Dodgers 1.1 million for 1 year. He's recovering from a shoulder surgery, so he's going to be out, I believe, the first few months. Um, and one that kind of stuck out too is David Peralta, who was a longtime Arizona Diamondback. He is going to go to the Dodgers on a 1 year, $6.5 million deal. And Peralta was, with the Diamondbacks
mm-hmm.
until he was traded midseason, went to Tampa. And I was looking at his numbers, and he had a power outage when he got traded to Tampa. Had 161 at bats, no homers. So I'd imagine he's looking for a bounce back, maybe a platoon bat with Chris Taylor out there.
Yeah, I think, both of those guys are pretty established major leaguers. And,
Yeah.
the Dodgers are a team that a lot of people had said have been really quiet this offseason. And, those are two kind of good value adds. The Reyes one, especially, like you said, he'll miss a little bit of time, but for 1 year, 1.1 million, where you could have him, the Dodgers are probably expecting to be in playoff contention by the time he's healthy. So being able to add a guy like that to your bullpen at a pretty discounted rate is pretty much a low risk, high reward kind of signing for them. And, I think probably one of the biggest question marks for the Dodgers was their outfield,
Yep.
and so Peralta is a great, even if he's your fourth guy or your backup plan, if one of the three guys you're planning on doesn't have the season that you're hoping for, I think he's a great option for them to have to plug into the lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're kind of addressing some of those issues that we talked about earlier, a few episodes ago, where it's like, oh, their left side of the infield left, but it's okay. They could plug in Gavin Lux and Max Muncy at short and third, respectively. So, and then they go inside Peralta. So
Yeah.
what they're doing is they plug and play, and they have a few guys like that this offseason. We talked a little Marlins a few episodes ago with Jazz Chisholm moving to center. They traded one of their former first round picks to the A's, JJ Bleday, who was a fourth overall pick in 2019. He's going to Oakland in exchange for another, I believe, former top pick, AJ Puck, who's a reliever, who's a really good reliever, by the way, averaging 10.4 Ks per nine in his big league career. So the Marlins are getting a big, lefty reliever. The A's are kind of getting a guy who struggled in the big leagues last year in 65 games with the Marlins. So just a trade to note there. I mean, seems like an
Yeah, I
A's
mean,
move.
sometimes guys need a, yeah, yeah. When I read it, I was like, okay, yep, A's gonna A's.
Yep.
But sometimes guys need a change of scenery. So maybe the Marlins obviously moving Jazz to the outfield kind of makes it a little more of a full house out there, and so I think it was probably a good move for them to get Puck. I think Puck was always a kind of the guy. I mean, like you said, he's pitched well when he has, but he's also had some injuries. I feel like I think maybe that might be a situation too, where just a change of scenery hopefully works well for both guys. And the Marlins are kind of like the National League A's
Kind
when
of.
you, and so it's maybe that it's just kind of interesting to see them kind of work together on a deal that because they're hardly going to have superstars to trade, but some of these role guys that or prospects that they can move around. It'll be interesting to see how it works out for them because I think they both have young talent that you can get excited about. Probably a little bit more on the Marlins side than the A's right now. Um, so
Yeah, I mean, interesting move. I mean, and by the way, Bleday is 25 years old, had 25 homers across both levels. And again, like I mentioned, a former fourth overall pick. So the A's, I mean, that's the kind of move that they make, and maybe they could cash in. There are two extensions to note on the starting pitching front. The Astros are signing one of their postseason heroes, Cristian Javier, to a 5-year, $64 million deal. This guy was one of the better pitchers in the American League last year. He's going to need to pick up a lot of the slack with Verlander gone. But he was third in Ks per nine last year in baseball with pitchers with a minimum of 140 innings. And he was only behind Carlos Rodon and Shohei Ohtani in that. Um, and it was a part of two no hitters, combined no hitters, one of them in the World Series. So
yeah.
he's sticking in Houston long term.
Yeah, I didn't know I'm not sure how many years of arbitration he had left. I'm assuming this buys out at least 2 or 3 post arbitration years. And so it's kind of, where both sides kind of win. He gets 64 million. He gets some long-term security where if, he came out and blew out his arm next year and then they don't offer him anything and he's gone. And then the Astros, it's very similar, for I know a lot of Giants fans or a lot of our audience is Giants fans. It's kind of reminds me of the Bumgarner deal where, yeah, once you level it out, it was a discount for the team, but the player gets that financial security for himself long term. And so, I'm not surprised that the Astros, especially after losing Verlander, would want to, make sure they have an anchor in their rotation for several years to come to kind of replace that.
Yeah, he's severely underrated. This is a good move for Houston. I mean, the amount of pitching they had last year was so absurd in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't be said otherwise on the other coast, on the left coast, for the Padres, but they're locking up one of the few like quality starting pitchers they do have. Darvish was extended by the Padres 6 years, 108 million. And this one's interesting because like they're really banking on Darvish to continue to be a top
Yeah.
end starting pitcher until age 42. So I
Yeah.
mean, woo, Darvish.
Because I think he was supposed to be a free agent after this year,
I think so
correct?
too. Yeah.
And I think he was already going to make like 20 million or so. And so if you look at it, if you take that out, it's like a 5 year, 80 million extension or so, I want to say. So basically 15, 16 a year after this season to get through 42. I was surprised that, locking up a guy because he's thrown a lot of innings as well.
Yeah.
And so hopefully he holds up and stays healthy. I love watching him pitch. He's also a gold Twitter follow if you want to have some good laughs. Seems like a fun guy. So I hope he stays healthy. But it's interesting they're banking on that. Also, I just kind of thought long term too, because they're going to have potentially a Machado extension to hand out. That what are they going to do with Soto when he's a free agent in a couple of years? So to kind of see them lock up that much money long term was kind of surprising to me. I expect they'll probably try to extend Machado. I think they plan on letting Soto leave because I don't see
Mhm.
how they'll afford Bogarts, Tatis, Machado, him, and Darvish. I don't know how they make that work, but maybe they will. But that was one of the first things I went to was okay, but
Yeah.
they have this core of offense. How's that going to impact their ability to lock them in long term?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And let's say that they do, kind of move all their tokens to locking up Machado um and Soto, and then you let, Darvish walk in the process, and who knows what happens with your pitching. So I guess it's kind of
Yeah.
them, getting a stabilizer in there and having that work for them. But and Darvish could be the type of pitcher that, ages pretty well. I think he's had a Tommy John already. Health has been an issue at
Mm-hmm.
times, but it could be a guy that pitches well, late, you know. I guess we've
Yeah, I
seen it a
feel
little bit
I feel like
before.
he can be like crafty enough, and he has enough in his arsenal that he doesn't have to rely completely on like just blowing guys away. And
Yep.
so, as long as the arm is healthy, like I think he could be a guy that could definitely stay effective that long.
Yeah.
And dude, getting paid bank to live in San Diego until you're 42, can't blame
Yeah.
the guy for jumping on that opportunity. That's for sure.
Yeah. And the Padres, they're going to be playing a lot of meaningful games the next few years. And like, I don't know about you, but like, and I know he did have one clunker when he was with the Dodgers in postseason, but like, I'm not mad with Darvish starting a postseason game for my team. So,
No,
so he's got that going for him too. And the Padres definitely trust a guy
he
like that.
he's a name everyone knows, but I don't think a lot of people realize how dominant he really is. And he's had some really high quality, quiet years where, he just kind of goes about his business and locks it down. But, he doesn't always necessarily lead the league in strikeouts or anything like that. But he's had some really great years. So, you
Yeah.
know,
And I know that there's
the
been
Giants fan
some,
in me is like, damn it, the Padres locked up another great guy. But
yeah, there's been some great Japanese pitchers in the past. Hideo Nomo, Daisuke Matsuzawa, Tanaka, Tani's going to be in that list too. But if you're looking at like most accomplished, and I got to look this up in terms of pitching, Darvish might be closing in on number one for now until Otani passes him. So we'll have
yeah,
to see for
yeah.
sure on that. Um, and then a few more things here before we wrap up. It is Super Bowl week. You probably already watched the Super Bowl. You definitely already watched the Super Bowl. By
Yeah,
the time
just
you're listening.
for the team for the Yeah, for the listeners out there, it's 2 o'clock on Super Bowl Sunday right now. So kickoff is in about an hour and a half.
Yes. So we don't know. We're clueless as you're listening to this. You know so yell right now if you're listening on your phone or in the car or whatever. Yell the final score because we don't know it. We're oblivious to this. We're living in the past still. But a part of the pregame festivities, there was an announcement on Fox because Fox has a Super Bowl. They switch off. This year it's Fox. And during the pregame show, they kind of highlighted a baseball note. And Fox historically has really really good baseball
Mhm.
coverage in terms of their pre and post game shows for the weekly games and postseason games, and it's usually Kevin Burkhardt, David Ortiz, Frank Thomas, A-Rod. Well, they're bringing in a new guy, and it's Derek Jeter, who's going to be doing TV alongside A-Rod, Ortiz, Tom. So this is interesting to me, but he's gonna. I never thought saw him getting in the TV. What did you think about this?
Yeah, it's always surprising to me when like some of these like icons who made like a ton of money during their career and can do whatever they want, get into broadcasting.
Yeah,
Speaking of NFL and Super Bowl, like Brady, he's taking this year off, and in 2024 he's going to start doing NFL. You know, I think broadcasting though, it's kind of I get it more than coaching because coaching, you have to be there every day, long days. Broadcasting, you can work, especially in baseball, for Fox, like just the weekends and the postseason. Cool. And so, you know, I get it. These guys have played baseball their whole lives. It's who they are. It's like such a big part of their identity, and they carry that, that their name carries so much weight that their opinions matter to a lot of people. So I get it. I get why they want to do it. I get why the networks want them to do it. Um, obviously with Jeter teaming up with A-Rod, who, I know, that's going to be an interesting combo because, you and I have talked about it to great lengths for years, but, they started off as great friends. They were young players at the same time. They've had an interesting relationship since then. I'll just leave it at that. And then also, dropping Big Poppy in the middle of that, you have the Red Sox Yankees rivalry, and now these guys are all going to be, kumbaya on Fox. It's interesting. It'll be fun to watch how, I'm sure they'll on air they'll keep it, and I'm sure they get along fine now, but if you would have told me like 20 years ago that A-Rod, Jeter, and Big Poppy were going to be friends on live TV, I'd have thought you were nuts.
yeah, and you got like one of everybody there. You got the goofy guy, you got Ortiz there. Then you got, Jeter, who's gonna probably be like more of the level-headed like adult in the room. And then A-Rod, the guy, I don't know what he does usually, but and they're I think they're all gonna be good. They're all gonna be good together. Jeter could basically do whatever he wants at this point in his life. Um, and him choosing to take a TV job with Fox, like anybody that goes into broadcasting, I feel, any former player that goes into broadcasting really must love the sport, for them to, continuously want to be around it and deal with whatever travel comes with it. Um, so
uh,
props to Jeter for that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see like how much of his personality he lets come out because he's an interesting guy. Everyone knows him, but he's always been kind of, I don't know if vanilla is the right term, but he's always just been kind of bland to me. He was the captain of the Yankees for over for 20 years, but you never really heard like a bad word about him, which is
Yeah.
fine. Um, and but he was never really a lightning rod, good or bad, aside from his play on the field. And so it'll be interesting to see, because I want to watch, I want to hear his opinions, but I don't need to just have him be kind of, yes, this was a great play. I want to
Mhm.
see some personality from these on air guys, and so hopefully can let some of his personality shine for Fox.
Exactly. And it's interesting because like he's talked about like all of his plays, for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's gone over his flip play so many times. He's gone over his hitting style so many times, but we never really hear
He's
him
gone over the
analyze
play into the
the
stands.
play into the stands. We never like now we're gonna get him, we're gonna get to hear him talk about other players. So I think that's fun too. And speaking of the Super Bowl, we came up with maybe a few players who would do well in the NFL, who are built for the NFL, who have the certain skill set to play in the National Football League at a high level. there's definitely a lot of like NFL players that have kind of coexisted in the baseball world. Kyler Murray had that big decision years ago. Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders. There's a number of them that kind of coexisted in baseball at the same time or had to pick, and a lot of football players that ended up, you know, playing baseball in high school and college and vice versa. So is there anybody that comes to your mind in terms of players that could do it, who could play in the NFL that are in the league today or in the
It,
league before?
yeah, it's a fun conversation because, like you mentioned, there's been a lot of guys that have been able to play both. There's guys that have been drafted in both, and they've had to
Mm-hmm.
make the choice. And a lot of times they choose football because they can get their money right away, and they know they're going to be in the NFL instead of going and kicking around buses in the minors for a few years. I think Tom Brady was the last player still active, even though it was a different sport, who was drafted by the Expos. But current day players initially came to mind to me were like Trout and Judge. I could see Judge being like he's just built, and I could see Trout, he's being maybe like a safety or something like that, where he can just get some speed behind him, and he's a big dude. So I could see both of them, and then guys that kind of just look like football players to me would be like Dan Vogelbach or like a Kyle Schwarber, where they might not be like built up as much as a football player, but their build looks like they'd be a football player almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if they put more work into it.
Yeah. So those are like the few guys that kind of jumped out to me right away when we decided to think about this a little bit. I know you went more specific, position specific, but who do you have in mind?
Yeah, I went position specific, and like we know in today's like game in the NFL, we see like a lot of like mobile quarterbacks who like to scramble and like to, evade the pocket a little bit, and like for me, Arenado, like I for whatever reason I pictured Nolan Arenado making that like play, charging in, fielding a ground ball, throwing off balance. Like he does a lot of things off balance, which makes me think that he could thrive, you know, as a quarterback today with,
Yeah.
a lot of pressure. So and he's got a great arm too. He's got a cannon. And we've seen him go to his left. We've seen him charge. We've seen him he's really good going to his right. And throwing in foul territory. So I think Arenado would be a great quarterback. You could go with Machado too. Any third baseman, past or present, that has done that. And, Brandon Crawford would be cool too. Just Giants ties, because high school quarterback down there in Pleasanton at Foothill High School. He's done it before. And then I had Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on my offensive line. A big guy there who could definitely hurt someone. Um, so that kind of like goes with the mold of maybe Judge and Vogelback and those guys. And then Byron Buxton as like a wide receiver. Like if anybody, first of all, good hands. Byron Buxton, a guy who could catch anything in the outfield, and I'm confident in his speed that he could beat a guy one on one in the backfield. So Byron Buxton as my wide receiver. Tony Kemp as my running back. I thought about running back, and it's like interesting because running backs, like, you see some of the smaller ones, and you also see the ones that are just built. Like when you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned Trout, I was like, oh, maybe Trout could be a running back, because
Yeah.
there's some guys that are just like machines. Like Marshawn Lynch was always just, he was fast, but he's also just a big guy, like a bull. And
Yeah.
Tony Kemp is not a bull, but he's a guy who might be able to get creative with his being a running back. So, yeah, I mean, it is a fun
Yeah.
exercise. It is. And I think when the NBA finals come by, I think we should do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also made me think a lot about like Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson, the guys who actually played both at like the highest level. And I wish Bo Jackson would have stayed healthy, because that would have been
Mm.
amazing to watch.
Don't make me grab the book.
He has a book for everybody, folks. But yeah, so yeah, definitely we'll do this again for the NBA finals as well. But yeah, it was really fun. And just
Otani.
to kind of wrap up a bow on the episode, Otani, where would he play?
I don't know,
Are you
but
saying?
like
Oh,
he could probably do it. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him.
yeah, definitely. I mean, shit, he's fast. He could you could put him on a line and blow by some guys. He has a cannon. He could go figure. Of course, Otani's going to play multiple positions in the NFL.
Yep. Punt return.
Yeah, but I've always looked forward to the Super Bowl. Usually, I hope the Niners are in it, and they were close this year. But I always like the Super Bowl because it's kind of like the last hurdle before spring training. Like when Super Bowl's over, I'm like, it is baseball season now, and so looking forward to hopefully a fun, competitive, entertaining game, but also looking forward to it being over because it's time, man. It's baseball
Yeah.
season.
I think of that too. I think of usually when the Super Bowl's over, there's always a handful of people that tweet like baseball, the floor is yours. And like
Yeah.
MLB on Fox will put on a graphic and it's like it would have those words on it. So
Yeah, I usually do like a Happy New Year post. Like
yeah.
it's officially a new year for baseball. So
Yep, it's the baseball new year for sure. So yeah, hopefully everybody enjoyed that big game. And hopefully the team that you rooted for did well. All you
or if you're a Niners fan and you hate both these teams, I hope neither team has fun.
Yes, there you go. And especially the Philly Eagles fans, like they could from what we heard from 49ers fans, not the greatest bunch. I think we knew that already though, but yeah, but we'll definitely
Worst kept secret in sports. Philly fans are brutal.
exactly. I'm not breaking news here at all. But yeah, no, hopefully everybody enjoyed the big game. I'm sure Rihanna was fantastic. And I'm sure the commercials were fun too. So a lot of elements to the Super Bowl, but baseball's right around the corner. By the time we talk, we're gonna be like, players are gonna be in camp
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
almost.
when you hear from us next week, there will be players in officially in spring training. A lot of guys have been down there already, but pitchers and catchers will have reported by the time you hear from us next after this
Uh,
episode.
yes, yes. Let's go. Can't
Let's
wait for that.
go.
Can't wait for that. Tyler, this was awesome. Uh, we shut it down again.
We shut it down. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3 inning, and you guys could check out the podcast on our Twitter page at shutdown_inning, and then go check it out on Spotify. I think there was something with Apple Podcasts that I had to punch in, and we're gonna get it on Apple Podcasts. I know that there's a little bit of an issue there that I'll fix. And then YouTube, and I think wherever you find your podcast. So go check us out, and see you next time.
That's what's up.